So stats for February came out, and I will say they probably looked a little bit better than most would have anticipated. February 2022, as we all know, was the all-time record when it comes to pricing. There was also a super high level of sales. Basically, every property that came to market was getting a ton of action. A much different story of where we're at today. Let's go through the numbers and talk about where we're at in today's market as we go through February 2023. I'm Michael Ouzas. I'm a realtor in the Greater Toronto area, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on the February 2023 stats. And if you ever wanted to book in a call with me to discuss what exactly I've been seeing on the ground level in today's market, you can click on that first link in the description down below. So let's jump into the February 2023 Greater Toronto Area market stats. And again, the Greater Toronto Area is different than the city of Toronto. The average price down from $1,334,000 to about $1,100,000, just under. That's a drop of 17.9%. Active listings are up about 40%, and number of sales down 47%. Now, the media is going to take these numbers and really run with them. The biggest thing for me that I'm seeing is the months of inventory. These are all big numbers, but one thing I wanted to point out is that the average price is still above where things were in 2021. Active listings are ahead of where things were in 2020 and 2021. And the total number of sales is down dramatically from the last 3 years. Months of inventory at just over 2 months. That's something we're going to pay attention to as we move along. If we look at Toronto proper, 1.2 million was the average price for the 416, just under 2,800 listings and just over 3,200 sales. As we get into February 2023, we can see sales are down 46%, active listings are up 47%, and the average price down 11.5%. Now, I think this is a big number to pay attention to because in the Greater Toronto Area, we're almost at 20%, but for Toronto proper, just over 11% of a drop. And the 416 also didn't have the same run up as other markets. We're still ahead of 2021 and 2020. Months of inventory at just under 2.4 months, and this number was actually much higher in January. So again, going to be interesting to see where things end up. And remember, months of inventory is how many months would it take to sell everything that's currently on the market right now. I wanted to pull these numbers to really compare the 416 to 905, and this to me is what stands out the most. That the number of sales across all markets were down almost 40, maybe almost 50%. But the average price difference was much bigger between the 416 and 905. And 416 also is pretty vast. So when you get into those major pockets, these numbers aren't as drastic as well. Now, the year-over-year summary, and this is what does not look very pretty, but as we take a look at it, down 47% in sales, down 40% in new listings, up 38% of active listings, and the average price down 17.9% as a whole. And again, these are Greater Toronto Area numbers. And the average days on market has pretty much doubled or tripled in some areas. Look at average price, and I think this is what really stood out to me the most. The decline didn't really happen from February to February. The decline actually happened from February through July, and we've been hovering along relatively steadily throughout. Now, December and January are typically slow months in real estate as it is, and these past months were definitely no exception. But February basically brought us back to line with where things were going before December and January. What I wanted to point out here on the monthly sales data is where months of inventory were last year. And in February 2022, 0.7 months of inventory, which is astronomically low. 0 to 3 months of inventory is a seller's market. So if you're not even at 1 month of inventory, that is extreme seller's market. And that kept up through February, March, April. And then in May, we started to see things hit the 2s and even as high as a 3 in July. Remember, that biggest drop happened from February through July, and things have been relatively steady throughout since. What stands out to me in the February 2022 numbers is that most of the sales happened between 1.25 million and 1.5 million. But when we get into February 2023, there were a lot more sales in the 1 million to 1.25 range. As we know, interest rates have gone up. 8 times since February. And that's pretty reflective in that 15 to 20% less buying power, which would drop things from that 1.25 to $1 million. If we jump over to the benchmark price, this is what really stands out as we go from February 2021 to February 2022 and back to February 2023. We saw a big run up from 2021 into 2022. It really cooled off through July, and we stayed on a relatively steady stream since. We look at the detached market was actually up from January through February. Same thing with the townhouse market, and condos were down slightly from January to February. Overall, though, pretty steady in the last couple of months. And as we get through March, we might even see another uptick from where February pricing is, depending on the property type and the market. These are Greater Toronto Area numbers. As we look into Toronto, similar story. However, the peak for townhouses and condos happened in March and April. So we'll see how things play out here as we get into the March numbers. But overall, a big run up from February 2021. One thing I wanted to point out is February 2021 was actually a pretty big drop in the downtown core, which definitely factors into these numbers as well. So when we look at the benchmark pricing chart, we're actually kind of back to where things were in September, October, November of 2021. And that's not a massive drop from where things were at the peak in 2022. So as the interest rate hikes continue through the year, most of that drop happened in July, just like we mentioned before. And we saw that uptick from January to February in detached, townhouses, and condos relatively flat month over month. So those are the stats, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on if they're surprising to you or if they're exactly what you had expected. As we continue through March, I've pulled the numbers week after week, and I've noticed an increase in prices in some sectors and especially in certain pockets in certain areas. I'll be curious to see how the March numbers look on a year-over-year basis. I'm Michael Ouzas. Thanks for watching.